After his wife passed away from a fever, Samuel buried himself in farm work, trying to fill the emptiness in his heart with lonely planting seasons. But the more he tried, the more he realized some voids, music, are never meant to be filled. Only Dust, his old but loyal horse, remained as the last thread tying him to life. Every morning, Dust would stand waiting for Samuel to open the stable door. Every night the horse would nuzzle its head into his hand as if asking, "Are you still hanging in there?" So that night, when the sound of the stable door being slammed echoed into the lonely darkness, Samuel shot upright. He ran outside just in time to see Dust charging into the night as if something was chasing him. Samuel could not fall back asleep. He sat on the front steps, the oil lamp flickering, his hand gripping the worn-out reins. Losing Dust. He knew that would mean losing the very last thing keeping him from falling into the depths of solitude. The night wind swept across the wide, endless land, carrying the sound of insects and a loneliness so deep it sent chills down the spine. Samuel whispered softly, as if speaking to the only friend he had left, "Come back, boy. Don't leave me too." He had no idea that Dust's return the next morning would bring with it a twist of fate that would change his life forever. The sun had just begun to rise above the rocky ridges when Dust appeared on the trail, panting heavily. Sweat strewn patches across his silver-gray coat. Samuel saw him from afar, and his heart skipped a beat as if he had just been pulled back from the edge. He ran forward, but his steps froze after just a few seconds. There was someone on the horse, a young Apache woman, tall and broad-shouldered, her arms solid like they had been carved from the red earth of the south. Her skin was sun-darkened, her bare feet bleeding. Her animal skin dress was torn, bruises blooming across her neck, shoulders, and hips. She looked on the verge of collapsing, her hands barely clinging to the horse's mane to keep from falling off. Samuel stood still. The early wind swept past him, carrying the dry heat of the desert and a wave of unease straight into his gut. He knew right away she was not just a wanderer. The marks on her body were the marks of someone being hunted. Dust stopped right in front of Samuel, breathing hard like he had galloped a long way to protect a life. The girl looked up. Her eyes were dark and deep, sharp like mountain stone. But inside there was a poorly hidden panic. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw, like it had scraped against gravel. Samuel stepped forward, his hand gently touching her solid arm. Her skin was burning with exhaustion, with fear, with the desperation of escape. She was heavier than he had expected. Not just from muscle, but from the weight of things that could not be named. He helped her down. She swayed, nearly collapsing into his shoulder. The smell of Apache herbs, sweat, the scent of someone who had run all night for her life. All of it wrapped around him, tightening his throat. He did not ask who she was. Did not ask what had happened. He only said one short sentence, low and steady like the ground beneath his feet. "You can stay for now." Tala, that was the name she gave when he brought her into the cabin. In the dim light of the wooden house, Samuel placed a bowl of water beside her, then searched for cloth bandages, setting them on the table without a word. Tala looked at him. Her eyes had lost their edge now. They held only exhaustion and gratitude. She placed her large sun-darkened hand over her chest and murmured something in Apache that Samuel could not understand, but he felt it. A thank you from the heart. That day, the silence inside the cabin was no longer empty. It was the beginning. Tala slept for nearly an entire day before she finally woke up. When Samuel stepped into the cabin, she was already sitting up. An old blanket draped across her thighs, her dark eyes following his every movement, as if needing to be sure this was still a safe place. Morning sunlight slipped through the gaps in the wooden boards, casting light on her broad shoulders and firm arms. The features of someone raised among stone and hardship. Samuel placed the cast-iron pot on the stove, and the smell of warm corn porridge began to fill the room. Tala watched him, her cheeks tightening as she tried to hide her hunger without saying a word. He set a bowl down in front of her. She bowed her head not in submission, but in what seemed like an Apache ritual of respect. After the meal, Tala stood, her steps a little unsteady, but her eyes full of resolve. She walked outside, picked up the bucket beside the well, and began drawing water with movements that were slow but strong. Samuel stepped forward to help. But Tala shook her head. "I.ca and do it," she said in broken English. She said little, but every word carried the weight of a promise that she would no longer be a burden to anyone. In the days that followed, they lived in a quiet rhythm, strange but warmly comforting. Tala repaired the stable roof, tying wooden beams with hands that were no different from a man's. Samuel taught her how to sort corn seeds, how to tell good soil from dead earth. Tala did not say much, but she understood quickly, her eyes sharp like those of a wild wolf, observing every detail. One afternoon, Samuel cut his hand on a saw blade. Before he could even react, Tala had pulled his arm toward her. She knelt, opened a small pouch tied at her waist, and took out a handful of dried herbs. A spicy, earthy scent rose into the air as she crushed them and pressed the mixture onto his wound. "Apache heal fast," she said softly. Her voice low but strangely warm. Her strong fingers touched his skin so gently that Samuel's heart skipped a beat. That night, Samuel placed an old but sturdy pair of boots outside the spot where Tala slept. Beside them was a loose gray shirt. Tala looked at the items, then looked at Samuel. Neither of them spoke, but her gaze softened like a warrior, suddenly touched by something she had not dared hope for in a long time. Kindness. As night fell over the red earth, the little cabin no longer echoed with the howl of wind slipping through the walls. It was filled with the breath of two people who seemed to have nothing in common, yet were quietly healing each other, piece by piece. That night, the wind over the red earth blew softly, carrying the scent of dry grass and the natural flute song of the desert. Inside the cabin, the flickering firelight danced across their faces. A man once broken by loss and a muscular Apache warrior woman, strong but bearing the scars of a heavy past. Tala sat by the fire, her long legs folded, the shadow of her solid arms cast onto the wall like the silhouette of a warrior who had never allowed herself to be weak. Samuel sat across from her, slowly turning a cup of cold coffee in his hands, searching for words, but not knowing where to begin. It was Tala who broke the silence. "Samuel," she said his name. Her voice low and rough, like it had traveled over stones. He looked up. Tala placed a hand over her chest as if touching the deepest place of pain. Family gone. Samuel did not ask why. He just waited. His eyes softer than usual. Tala stared into the flames, her gaze deep and dark as a desert well. "When I was little, white men came. Village burn. Mother, hide me. She not make it." Her hand clenched, the muscles in her arms rising as if ready for battle. But her voice trembled, a sound Samuel had never heard from this fierce woman until now. "Since then, men take me. Sell, trade, beat. I run, always run, no place to stay." Samuel felt his throat tighten. Someone as strong and powerful as Tala had spent her life without anyone to protect her. He set the cup down and opened up for the first time in years. "Tala, I know lost too." She looked up, her eyes steady, as if listening not just with her ears, but with her heart. "My wife," Samuel began, his voice dropping low, trembling just slightly. "She died from fever. I tried everything. Medicine, doctors, prayers, but I still lost her." He looked down at his callous hands since that day. "This house has not heard laughter. I just worked. Just tried to survive one more day. There was nothing left worth holding on to." Tala moved closer, her dark eyes warm like glowing embers. "You strong," she said. "Heart strong." Samuel gave a soft laugh, not out of joy, but release. "No, Tala. I am tired. I just never met someone who made me want to live again." Tala's gaze wavered. She reached out her large, warm, scarred hand toward Samuel. He took it like two souls worn down by the desert wind, finally finding the right place to rest. That night, they stayed beside each other without needing to touch much. But the truth was already clear. Two people who once seemed like strangers passing through each other's lives were quietly stepping into each other's hearts. Thank you so much for being here. If this story reminded you of days long gone, dusty red evenings, the sound of hoofbeats echoing deep in your chest, go ahead and subscribe to my channel so that each day we can sit together again and I will tell you another story from the West. That afternoon, the sky over New Mexico darkened. Even though the sun still hung high above the ridge, the wind shifted, carrying a swirl of dry dust from the distance, a sign of something folks on the frontier always feared. Uninvited guests. Samuel was fixing the fence when Dust suddenly let out a sharp whinny. The horse stomped his hooves against the ground, head raised, alerting that strangers were near. Samuel wiped the sweat from his brow, turned around, and saw three riders emerging from the red haze. Three men, anyone with a pair of eyes could tell what kind they were. Hounds, trackers, slave hunters. They stopped in front of the cabin, their eyes scanning the house, pausing at Tala, who stood just inside the doorway. That look made Samuel tighten his grip on the wooden beam in his hands. The one in the middle with a long scar slicing across his cheek spoke first. "Yesterday evening, we saw a tall Apache girl, broad shoulders, run past this way." He glanced toward the cabin, a crooked grin spreading across his face. "And we're also missing a gray horse that looks an awful lot like that one." Samuel understood immediately. These were the traffickers Tala had escaped from. He dropped the beam and took one step forward, his eyes cold as desert wind. "Dust does not belong to you." The scarred man shrugged. "No big deal. We came for the girl. Big, strong Apache like that fetches a damn good price. Hand her over." "Farmer." "Unless you want to die today," Samuel said nothing. He stepped back, opened the rear door, and returned with a shotgun resting firmly in his hands. The sharp click of the chamber echoed across the small yard. Tala stood behind him, her dark eyes narrowing like blades, her broad shoulders lowering into a stance, ready for battle. But Samuel held one hand out behind him, stopping her. He stood in front of the cabin door alone, facing three men with guns, horses, and filthy intentions. His voice was low, steady, not a single tremor. "She's not yours." In that moment, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The scarred man squinted. "Well, look at that. You sweet on that muscled-up Apache girl." He spat into the dirt. "Let me tell you something, farmer. We came to take back what's ours. You stand in the way. You die first." Samuel raised the shotgun a little higher. He did not blink. "Try me." The two men flanking him started to move, hands drifting toward their weapons. Dust let out another cry and the tension snapped tight like a bowstring ready to break. But then the scarred man held up a hand to stop them. He clenched his jaw, rage flashing in his eyes, but he turned his horse around. "Fine, keeper, but we'll be back with more men and less patience." The three horses turned. Red dust rose behind them as they rode off, leaving Samuel standing in the doorway like a living wall. Tala stepped beside him, her broad shoulder steady, though a faint tremble ran through her body. She looked at him without blinking, her voice rough but filled with feeling. "Samuel, they come back," he answered softly. But his words were sharp as steel. "I know, and I'll be ready." That night, Samuel added more wood to the fire in the cabin. The golden flames flickered against the wooden walls, casting light onto his tense face. The traffickers would return. There was no question about that. But Samuel had never felt fear like this before. Not for himself, but for Tala. She sat by the window, the firelight catching the broad lines of her shoulders and her powerful arms like they had been carved from stone. She did not bow her head. She did not tremble, but there was something in her eyes, something fragile that only Samuel could see. He walked over and gently placed a hand on her solid arm. "Tala, you do not have to be afraid. I will not let anyone lay a hand on you again." She turned to look at him, her dark eyes flashing with an inner battle. Her whole life had been running, fighting, fearing. But now someone stood before her, willing to face danger, to protect her like something truly worth protecting. Not because she was weak, but because she deserved to be protected. Tala stood, stepping close to him. She was half a head taller, her shadow falling over him like the silhouette of both a warrior and a woman searching for shelter. "Samuel." Her voice rasped. "No one has ever been this kind to me." He opened his mouth to say something, but Tala placed her large warm hands on his face. Her eyes burned with a light Samuel had never seen before. A mix of gratitude and a deep yearning to belong to someone. Then she whispered slowly, each word falling like a vow. "Let me feel you tonight." Samuel stood still, his heart clenched as if someone had grabbed hold of it. He had been afraid to love again, afraid of loss, afraid of opening up. But Tala was here, the strongest woman he had ever met, and at the same time, the most wounded. He placed his hand gently around her waist, feeling the warmth of her skin and the faint tremble beneath her muscle. "Tala, I will never let you hurt again. If you choose me, I am here." She lowered her head, resting her forehead against his, a sacred gesture among the Apache, shared only with those they trust completely. "I choose you," she said softly. But with the certainty of a mountain in the small cabin beneath the glow of the fire, two people long broken held each other tightly, not out of fleeting passion, but because they had finally found where they belonged. And that night, for the first time in years, Samuel no longer heard the howling wind outside the desert. All he heard was the heartbeat of Tala and his own. The next night passed like a wire stretched to its breaking point. No promises were needed. Samuel and Tala both knew the traffickers would return, and this time they were not coming to talk. Just as the sun slipped behind the red mountain ridge, the sound of hooves echoed from the distance. Steady, heavy, and many dust stomped hard inside the stable, a warning clear as day. Samuel blew out the oil lamp. The firelight inside the cabin became the last glow before thick darkness swallowed everything. Tala stood by the door, her tall frame solid like a wall. In her hands was a long bow she had crafted from seasoned wood. The string twisted from old rope she had found in the shed. Crude as it was, in Tala's grip, it became something fearsome enough to make any man hesitate. Samuel checked his shotgun, loading every chamber. Tala, if things go bad, run behind the mountain. Do not come back. She turned sharply toward him, the firelight catching the sharp lines of her jaw. No, just one word, but heavier than 1,000. I fight with you. He did not argue. The yard in front of the cabin lit up with torchlight. They had come at least 8 of them, 3 times more than the night before. The scar-faced man stood in the center, his voice slow and greasy, like he was enjoying the moment. Told you, farmer, we would be back. Hand over that big Apache woman. No one's coming to save you tonight. Samuel stepped out the door. Shotgun raised, the metal clicking cold into the night. Come and try. Tala stood half a step behind him, bow fully drawn, her muscled arms flexed beneath the moonlight. 2 figures, one tall and mighty, one strong and steady, faced down a pack of slavers. The scarred man gave the signal. 2 men charged first. Samuel pulled the trigger. The shotgun roared through the desert air. One dropped instantly. The other dove behind a water trough. At the same time, Tala's arrow flashed like lightning, piercing another man's shoulder and sending him screaming off his horse. They scattered, surrounding the cabin. Bullets flew. Voices howled. Dirt and stone exploded with every galloping step. Tala pulled Samuel behind the wooden wall. Her breath was fast, but her eyes were razor-sharp. They want me alive. Not dead, Samuel clenched his jaw. They are not touching you. But then a new sound rang out. Something neither of them expected. A metal whistle. More horses galloping fast, more than the group surrounding the cabin, and shouting familiar voices. The sharp command of Border Patrol. Tala's eyes widened. Samuel looked toward the trail. More torches appeared strong, bright, moving information. It looked like the Border Patrol. The traffickers glanced at each other, panic flashing across their faces. The scarred man cursed, and in that moment, the scales of fate finally began to tip toward Samuel and Tala. The sound of horses from the north thundered like a living storm, breaking through the night over the New Mexico frontier. Torches blazed in a long line. The scarred man turned his head and went pale. Border Patrol. Damn it. It was the Lincoln County Patrol. Led by Jack Hollister, a longtime friend who had worked beside Samuel many years ago. Riding straight into the fray. Jack shouted, "Drop your weapons. You are wanted for kidnapping and human trafficking." The traffickers panicked. Some tried to run. Others pulled their guns and fired back, but the patrol's aim was swift and overwhelming. Within minutes, the yard around the cabin became a chaos of gunfire, hooves, and men hitting the ground. Samuel stood in front of Tala, shotgun in hand. One man tried to slip behind the cabin, but Tala was waiting. She swung her powerful arm and punched him square in the face. He dropped like he had been hit by a falling boulder. Samuel called out. "Good hit," Tala exhaled, the corner of her mouth lifting like it was the first time anyone had praised her as a true warrior. The scarred man tried to flee. He kicked his horse through the fence line, but Jack spotted him. "Samuel, stop him." Samuel did not hesitate. He leapt onto dust. The old horse surged forward like he had shed 10 years, chasing the fleeing man. The scarred man turned back and fired wildly. Samuel ducked low. Dust veered sharply, dodging the shot. As the distance closed, Samuel shouted, "Stop. This is my land. You are not escaping." The man looked back just as Samuel grabbed his shoulder, dragging them both down onto the rocky dirt. Dust exploded in a cloud. The scarred man fought back, but Samuel pinned his arms and tied him down like a calf at branding time. When Samuel led the prisoner back to the cabin, Tala stood in the middle of the yard, moonlight wrapping around her tall, strong frame, but her eyes were soft in a way that caught him off guard. The patrol had captured the rest of the slavers. Jack walked up and clapped Samuel on the shoulder. "You saved a life tonight." And more than that, Tala looked at Samuel, her deep black eyes shimmering, not with fear, but with the weight of release. She stepped forward and placed her large, warm hand over his chest. "Samuel, I am free now. Because of you," he took her hand, gently squeezing it. "From the moment you came here, you already belonged." The night wind swept across the dry land, but for the first time, it did not carry only dust. It carried the warmth of a true home. Samuel's little cabin, once filled only with the sound of wind, was now full of breath, of laughter, and a future neither of them had ever dared to dream of. My friends, in the heart of a dry desert, Samuel and Tala found each other, not by chance, but because they both chose to open their hearts after losses that nearly broke them. Their love was not built on promises or perfection. It was built on kindness and the courage to stand beside one another in the middle of the storm. Their story reminds us sometimes the strongest healing does not come from time, but from someone who steps into our life and gently says you are not alone anymore. It has been an honor to tell you this story. I truly hope that wherever you are loved, protected, and never forgotten. I love you all, my treasured audience of Wild West storytelling. Let me know what you think about this story. Leave a comment below. Type number 1 if you enjoyed it, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping tales from the wild.